Okay, guys, how you doing? This is Robert, and Victoria's sitting to my right, the owner of Radar Busters, and we just left United's corporate headquarters there outside of Dallas. Showed them the install of our R9, and now we're going on an extended road trip to do some testing, and we're crossing the country now. We're heading east. We're east of Chattanooga, and we're going to be coming up into Virginia on Interstate 81 as we make our way east. Then we're going to head up to Montreal, Quebec, go to our favorite steak place that we love up there. When we get up there, it's worth the trip. Gibby's, I'll put a little plug for them. Gibby's is in Vieux-Port, old town of Montreal. Absolutely fabulous steak. And we got to make the trip just to get up there to have food. So food's an important thing in my life, so having a good meal. So at any rate, we're going to then be crossing the Trans-Canadian Parkway. So we're going to go, or the highway. We'll go through Ontario from Quebec, and then Saskatchewan, Manitoba, ultimately through Alberta, and then to British Columbia, out towards Vancouver. And then we're going to actually drive up, fly and drive up through Alaska and get on the I don't think we're going to go as far as Prudhoe Bay, but we're going to get up, certainly up to, I hope, Anchorage and Fairbanks. So, and we'll be driving with the R9. Now we're looking forward to getting into the Edmonton and Calgary area, because there are a variety of different photo enforcement systems that we want to encounter and see how the R9 does against these systems. I think there's GATSA, there may be multi-radar, there's the Mesta Fusion. So we're going to see how the R9 works, and we'll be documenting that now. But in any event, I wanted to, we've alluded in some of our previous videos, like the one when we were driving with a radar detector and got nailed, but got away in Canada, that we were going to tell some other stories from the road. So this actually, the one I'm going to share with you now, is one that happened, I think, on the last trip back through Texas. So we had, we had passed through the Dallas area. We were heading towards El Paso, and that's Interstate 20, which then runs into 10, a couple hours east of El Paso, and we make our way west. So it was on that stretch of road, Interstate 20. Now, the highway speed system in Texas, in some of these areas, is actually 80 miles an hour, which is really nice. And so here's the deal. We had the Uniden R8. We were driving the vehicle. That's my preferred daily driver, go-to detector. So we drive with the Uniden R8. And I'm generally, at 80, I'm probably doing about 92 at any given moment. About 12 over, 15 over, nothing crazy. And I'm in the left lane, and I like doing that because oftentimes, or most of the time, when you're driving on a highway with a posted limit of whatever it is, police troopers generally travel maybe 10 or 15 miles above the posted limit. And so by driving a bit beyond that, you generally avoid, I find, a state trooper coming up in your back door and nailing you from the back. But it also puts you at risk, and it's happened to me a couple times, passing and overtaking a state trooper who may be in an unmarked vehicle on the right side of the road, just cruising closer to the speed limit. And so this story is one of those circumstances. So I was in the left lane, I'm passing vehicles, and I'm moving along at probably about 92, as I said, and I realize that at the last minute that there's a black unmarked patrol vehicle in an SUV, probably like a Chevy Tahoe or something to that effect. And I realized it, and I was going a bit above the posted limit, and so I immediately nailed on the brakes and got my speed down. And when I did that, I signaled, and I was going to pull myself behind the patrol vehicle and just, pace him in the back. But as I signaled and started to move over, and I may have been braking at the time, he lit me up with 34/7 radar. And I knew he had lit me up, obviously, because the detector went off full strength. He hit me with IO. But I also know, given that I was driving the radar detector, that he hadn't been tracking or clocking me before that time. So I think he was waiting for me to pass him, figuring that he's unmarked. I'm not cognizant or not aware that he was there. He's just blending in with traffic. But when he saw me signal to get behind him, he wanted to take his shot and to try to get my speed. So he does, and he slows down, and I know what's going to happen when you do that. He's slowing down, and then I think he sort of pulls over to the shoulder, and I go around him, and I know exactly what's going to happen. He's going to light me up, and of course he did that. Now, we were also driving with a super protector on track, which I use for photo enforcement. And but in Texas, when I've driven through that state several times, I've gotten warnings for obscuring the plate. Now, they never made me take the plate off or the cover off, but I still get warnings, and obviously I don't like to get pulled over under any circumstances. So I try not to pass these vehicles anyway, because they'll spot the vehicle, they'll see that there's a plate cover, and they'll pull me over just for calls for that. So at any rate, that's what I was doing. I was pulling over, he lights me up, and I have to pull over. Now, I'm very courteous to police. I support them. I'm a big back the blue kind of guy, thin blue line kind of thing. So I don't pull over immediately on the shoulder for concern that the officer, when he's out making the stop, can either get rear-ended or drive the car into me, or get killed. God forbid those things happen. People aren't paying attention, and then they swerve, and so I avoid that whenever I can. So I drove a little bit. I waved them on, indicating that I was going to get us into a safe area, and I figured they appreciate that. So I came up to an exit, and I pulled off the main highway, the interstate, and to the side, and he comes up behind me, and I said, look, I didn't pull over immediately because I wanted to get us in a safe place, and he appreciated that. He said he appreciated it. So, of course, he asked me for my license and registration, which I provide, and he tells me why he pulled me over for speeding, and I think I asked him what was the speed, and he told me 86, and I'm thinking to myself, come on, 86 and an 80, that's a little ridiculous. Now, normally when I get pulled over or I get lit up, and it happens, I'll take the radar detector, if it's on the windshield, off the windshield and hide it. So, they're not going to see the detector on the windshield, even if it's, in a state that's legal, which is, basically all of them except for Virginia. So I happened not to on this time. I thought, the heck with it. I'm just going to leave it up there. And that was my first mistake. So he noted it. And so he goes back, I think, to his car to run the license plate off of my registration, because you can't really see it easily. And he comes back. Now, Victoria is pretty sure, right, that he was just going to give me my information. And I don't know how it came about, but he made a statement that, I lit you up and you slowed down. Obviously, I had a radar detector, and of course that would be the reaction anybody with a radar detector would do. So that's a simple, obvious thing to say. But I knew in my heart that I had already slowed down, because the radar detector only went off when I was pulling in behind him. And I said, well, I know that you lit me up right as I was pulling in behind you. And he said, oh no, I lit you up before that. I'm like, well, look, I have the radar detector. I know when it goes off. And I think Victoria thought I was getting argumentative. And I truly wasn't being argumentative, but I'm not going to let a police officer make a false statement. And you know these guys, as you found out with the one video that I got doxxed on 127 and the 70 in Nevada, that these guys have their Axon camera, body cameras, and they're recording everything that's going on in the traffic stop. So, you know, it's all there. I disagreed with them. And I said, look, I don't want to argue. And so maybe she thinks that was something I shouldn't have said either. But I was like, look, I'm not going to argue. I know what happened. So he then goes back to his car, right? He was going to sort of hand me the stuff, you thought.
Yes.
And then he went back to his car and he ended up citing me for 86 and an 80. And I was really furious. Now, when he handed me the ticket, I had to sign it. It was like on a little, you know, one of those, what do you call those boards? You know, clipboards. Underneath the ticket that I had to sign, I saw his private notes that had printed out on his system. And the first thing I saw, and that's not something they give to the drivers, that's for their own notes, perhaps for a future court appearance that they can refer to their notes. The first thing I saw was driver was with a radar detector. First thing. And the second thing, I saw his notes that the driver responded to my radar by braking, and the speed went from 87 to 86. And I saw those two things, and I'm thinking, well, that's nonsense. And anybody drives with a radar detector, you know, if you're driving fast, 10, 12, or 15 over, and you get lit up with IO, you're going to hit the brakes harder than 1 mile an hour in the course of time. You're going to nail that brake and like this and slow down and really peel the speed off. I didn't do that. So, at any rate, I really was annoyed that I got this ticket. And, you know, we're driving and I have another 12 hours to go before we get back to Phoenix. It's quite a drive. So, we get back, and then I call a friend of mine who I've known for years, Craig Peterson, who is an expert on radar speed equipment. I mean, he's been in the game since the 70s and 80s, and have been involved with manufacturers, knows the whole history of radar. And anybody who's going to know anything about radar, he's going to know. So I said, Craig, as I generally do, I call him and cry on his shoulder about the tickets that I get, and he laughs. But I said, this is the notes that the officer made, 87 to 86. He's trying to suggest that I'm speeding in reaction to his radar, and that's just not true. And these radar guns have a plus or minus tolerance of maybe 1 mile an hour, and maybe moving, maybe 2 miles an hour. And we also got that confirmed with a friend of ours who lives in San Antonio, right? Good Vail and Radar Buster supporter by the name of Peter. Shout out to Peter. Last time we were in San Antonio, I had also shared this story with him. And he was like, yeah, this is, a nonsense ticket. And normally I would pay it, save myself the time. But I looked up the fines in Texas, and a 6 mile an hour ticket is like $250, which is pretty steep, just for lousy 6 miles an hour over the posted limit. So that sort of burned me. And I don't like a situation where an officer makes what I believe to be a false claim. I mean, if you get me honestly and straight up, I own the ticket, and that's it. I don't complain, and I may fight it or not fight it, depending on, I think, the chances or the police officer and how flexible he is. But in this case, we all basically came to the same conclusion, that he basically just wrote me for having a radar detector. It's basically what this ticket was all about. And that's legal. So, in making notes like that, I know when you go to court, and I've had police officers read their own notes, that the first thing he's going to say is the first thing he had on his note. Driver was using a radar detector. What does that do? It prejudiced the court that I'm a habitual speeder. Now, whether that's true or not is not the point. You're making a leap that just because somebody drives the radar detector, you're a habitual speeder. That's certainly not the case. I can argue that people drive with radar detectors for situational awareness and to be safer drivers. And I know there are those who do that, and I certainly do it at times. But so I didn't like that. So I was talking to Peter, and Peter has a lot of experience successfully fighting traffic enforcement. And I think one of his, went up to the Supreme Court or something, either the state or whatever. And I think he ultimately won that. It was pretty unbelievable. So he's very knowledgeable of the law, the letter of the law, and the legal system in Texas. And Texas, unlike other states like Pennsylvania, for example, speeding is criminal. So it's not a summary violation and you just go to a district justice. It's a criminal violation. I think it could be like a light misdemeanor. And in this case in Texas, you have to face a prosecuting attorney or district attorney. So the officer is not just the one who brings the ticket, citation, or traffic stop to the court. It's actually prosecuted like a criminal case on behalf of the state or municipality with a district attorney. So I figured, and New Jersey I think was sort of like this. I've had experience in Jersey court. So at any rate, I'm going to fight the ticket. And I said, Peter, I just want to fight the ticket. Even if I have to go back to court, risk a ticket, which I probably would get one on the way back or a round trip, drive 12 hours, stay at a hotel, probably put $1,000 into the trip to fight a $250 ticket. But, you live and die on principle in some case. And again, I own most of the tickets because I deserve them when I get them. But this one I felt was really, it wasn't right. So I call the court and I request documentation and my plea, which they send me electronically, and I make my plea and I plea not guilty. Now, in Texas, you have the right to request a jury by trial, interestingly enough, not just in front of the judge. Now, I opted to waive that right. Peter recommended in Texas, you have the right to a trial by jury, have a trial by jury. At the very least, it's more resources for the court that they have to do, but you're entitled to that, trial by jury. But I had waived my rights to that, so I was doing it by the judge. So the next thing I did after I think the court date was set up about 2 months later, give or take, I was thinking about what are the next steps that I want to do. Well, I knew the body cam footage. I wanted to have that. I wanted to have his private notes because I was going to mount a defense. So what I did is I made a motion for discovery, and I don't think I've really ever done that before in traffic, and I've had plenty of tickets in my life, but I was going to take my gloves off. I was really going to fight this ticket and put them through the effort to produce this evidence that they have, and then I can prepare a case. Now, Peter tells me they can potentially drop this on you the day of your court appearance. Well, realistically, that's not really presenting anything because you have no opportunity to really prepare a defense. So I wasn't going to let that happen. So I made my written motion for discovery, and my court appearance was rapidly approaching. I think it was about 2 weeks away, and I called the court again. And I requested, where is the information I requested for my motion for discovery? I'm entitled to it. And the court clerk put me on hold and then came back a couple minutes later and told me that the case was dismissed by the prosecuting attorney. And I ultimately got a written notification in the mail. And the reason the case was dismissed was judicial, what was the word? Discretion, or prosecutory discretion. So I think by going to put them through the hoops, the department having to produce all documentation, video. I wanted the video from the body cam. I wanted video from the patrol vehicle. I wanted it all. His notes. I wanted everything. I think the prosecuting attorney, I even said that to the court clerk. I mean, this is come on, 86 and an 80. It's not even 6 over in a 25 zone. It's 6 over an 80. People get past it all the time at that speed. What are you talking about? So, I guess the moral of the story, this whole long story I'm giving you, is if you get a ticket and you feel you have real grounds that to mount a defense, it costs you nothing to make a motion for discovery. Put the burden on them and let them produce that evidence. And because you may get that discretion from either the judge or from the prosecuting attorney for the state or the county or municipality, that, you know what, this is just too much trouble for such a small ticket. They got bigger fish to fry. And that's the moral of the story. This one I put in the win column, and I wanted to share that, win some, lose some. This one was definitely a win, and I hope I can impart this wisdom to you to prepare a proper defense and make them work for this, your citation. So, again, thanks for watching. Join us on Facebook, Radar Busters on Facebook if you'd like. If you like the video, you put up with the whole thing or hung in there with me, give us a thumbs up, hit that bell, subscribe, and we're going to have more videos on the road as we drive now on this about 9,000 mile trip. We got more stories. I told you from the last one, we got an Australia story. We were there for 6 months. Incredible traffic enforcement in that entire country like I've never seen before. And there are lots of stories we can share with you about how brutal poor our Aussie friends unfortunately are subjected to by these absolutely draconian and invasive traffic enforcement. My heart goes out to every one of you guys that live there because it's a tough place. So anyway, we'll have more. Thanks for watching. Take care. Remember, drive safe, drive smart. Most importantly, drive protected.